Dr. Peter, thank you for joining us again here. Tell us, what's happening in Syria, especially there's one particular party, that the Hezbollah, which is not mentioned these days very much, and they've been they've been very conservative these days, even though with all that's happening with the civil war between the government and the rebels.
Well, Hezbollah is a Lebanese organization, and at the moment, Hezbollah Hezbollah is, how can I put it? Hezbollah has to be in the Lebanese government, and so there are sort of two possible scenarios for a Lebanese government. Either the sort of Hezbollah with the Maronites, or the Sunnis with the Maronites. The Maronites are a sort of Christian sect who traditionally dominated Lebanese politics, but since the civil war have not done so. Now, Hezbollah is a creation. Well, Hezbollah is an indigenous Lebanese political organization which started off as a militia, largely financed by Iran after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, which 1979 is midway or partway through the Lebanese Civil War of 1975 to 1990. And Hezbollah was started off, as I say, as a militia in the Lebanese Civil War, and it ended up as one of the most significant players in Lebanese politics. And the fact is that the Shi'i population of Lebanon, which was usually synonymous with the poor of Lebanon, is probably the Shi'is are now the largest single community. I mean, there's always the fiction that the Christians, as a whole, were sort of dominated the Muslims numerically, but for various reasons, including migration of Christians out of the country during the Civil War, growth rates among the Muslim population, etc. It is most unlikely that the Christians are more than a third or 35% or something like this of the Lebanese population. And the Shi'i population are mostly gathered around Hezbollah, which, as I say, was first a militia and then is now a sort of, likes to think of itself as a conventional political party, which in many ways it is. For example, because of the weakness of the Lebanese state, Hezbollah would undertake various sort of the kinds of things you'd associate, the activities you'd associate with a modern state: education, health, housing, and so forth. But in areas which Hezbollah dominates, it takes over these functions. But it does. If you are a Christian family living in a Hezbollah area, you go to the Hezbollah hospital. It's not discriminatory in that sense. In other words, they say, look, we control this region, and everybody who lives here is entitled to the same level of services as everybody else is. So they're not Boy Scouts, but on the other hand, they have the sense to know that that this is necessary in order to build up some sort of popularity. And so you have this sort of situation where you have these very powerful organizations within Lebanon, which undertake many of the functions that the state does. Now, naturally, because of Hezbollah's sort of function as part of the Shi'i revival in the Middle East, it has strong ties to Iran, and it has strong ties to Syria, which, for all practical purposes, regards itself, which is Iran's other strong ally in this region. However, the point is exactly what this alliance consists of, exactly what this means in political terms, is really quite difficult to say. I mean, what would Iran meaningfully do for Syria? I just don't know.
Now, what is Israel stand with the impact and the situation in Syria right now? And do they have any mixed feelings with, especially with the party Hezbollah?
Well, Hezbollah is not really part of the equation in that way because, after all, Hezbollah is in Lebanon, and Hezbollah, I mean, is regarded. You see, as I say, Hezbollah is regarded by many Lebanese as being the heroic defenders of the Lebanese state who did not allow Israel to advance into Lebanon or permanently into Lebanon in the summer of 2006. So, obviously the Israelis are sort of concerned about Hezbollah, but they also know that Hezbollah at the moment is probably wisely deciding to keep a low profile, confine itself to Lebanese politics, etc. Now, as I don't need to tell you, this is an extremely volatile region, and obviously, for the very peculiar political entity like Israel, uncertainty is obviously a cause of concern, worry, and so forth. I mean, in other words, the situation in Syria concerns Israel more than it concerns, let's say, Egypt. I mean, Egypt is obviously concerned, but it's not in its back. Syria is not in its backyard in the same way that Israel is. So, if with all this turbulence going on in Syria, the Israelis are worried that whatever succeeds Assad may be less palatable to them. And again, you have this sort of bogeyman of Islamic movements, militant Islamists and so forth, as raised as the sort of spectre of this, raised as what terrible thing may happen in Syria, what repercussions this may have for Israel, etc., etc. What the truth of all this is, one simply has no idea. As I say, I think. My gut reaction is that whoever takes over in Syria will be so concerned with reconstruction that they will give precious little thought to Israel.
Now, speaking about reconstruction, do you think that after the aftermath of Syria, and once all the dust has been settled down, do you think that Syria will be interested to build up its infrastructure, such as new roads, schools, buildings, and all that?
I don't doubt it. Yes.
Would there be a lot of opportunities for new businesses that will arise in Syria?
Well, it depends. I know too little about this kind of thing. I don't know how capital formation it works in a country like this. I mean, essentially what you have in Syria is a very, very strong state sector still, although quite a lot of privatization took place since the 1990s. But the state will still be the largest employer, but the state, of course, will be terribly short of money. And it's not like Iraq, where in the early years of the chaos and so forth in Iraq in the 2006, 7, 8 or something like that, the question was not that the country didn't have any money, but it was the circumstances and the lack of security were such that it was impossible to spend what money they had because you didn't have the peace to build things.
Now, speaking of which, is it true that in your observation at least, and probably my observation, that Syria is right now on the very precarious and economic brink?
Well, I would have thought so. I mean, I don't think. I mean, it seems to me that a civil war of this magnitude, which is has spread to the two major cities, and also in Homs, which is the third city where you've had immense destruction and so forth, particularly in the suburb of Baba Amr, that one wonders how life functions. I mean, how can people go to work? Can they earn money? Can the machinery of state function? I would have thought probably not. And because after all, this is not sort of, well, it's not particularly like the Malaysian insurgency or the insurgency in Malaya or the sort of the war in Vietnam, which are largely rural phenomena. These are situations where the state is bombarding and bombing its own cities, which are large urban centres of manufacture, of population concentration, etc., etc., etc. Now, if economic activity is gradually grinding to a halt, I just wonder how anything is actually paid for. I mean, soon people will not have enough to eat.
Now, speaking of which, having nothing much to eat in Syria, what's happening to the people in Lebanon? Syria and Lebanon are intertwined, and therefore, what do you see in your expert opinion? Do you think Hezbollah will come in and assist the people with food supplies, and of course, because being loyal to Hezbollah, do they gain a lot of benefits?
I think Hezbollah tries to see itself not as a sort of... I mean, if you ask them, they will say, we are a party of all the Lebanese. True, most of us are Shiite, but our aim is to represent the interests of all Lebanese. I mean, just as, whether you have a Republican or Democrat, the idea is to work for the people of the United States rather than those who have voted for a particular party. So I don't think it's that. I mean, the thing is that you see, basically none of these countries really make very much. I mean, they have they have an agricultural sector, and they have, in the case of Syria, a sort of reasonably well-developed industrial sector. But I mean, I'm sure they import practically everything, because the idea, because these countries are not independent economic entities anymore.
Now, for the next 6 months, what will happen to the politics and the policies with Syria and Lebanon? Are they going to be able to emerge and merge as one nation, or there will still be a Lebanon and Syria?
Oh, there will still be a Lebanon and Syria. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, obviously, in 1920, Lebanon was created by the French, and in the process took bits of what was traditionally Syria, particularly the Bekaa Valley and the Akkar in the north, and the Sidon and so on in the south. And this was added to Little Lebanon to make what was called Grand Liban, Greater Lebanon. But I mean, we're talking about, this is nearly 100 years ago, and it's quite difficult to on the whole, it's almost impossible to think that that this is going to change. And so if you're asking whether a merger between the two is likely, I would have thought very definitely not. I mean, the populations would not want it. And the other thing is there's a great discrepancy in size. I mean, Syria is about 22 million, Lebanon's about 4. And the idea that you get swamped in the Syrian Sea would discourage Lebanese from taking that project on. No, I don't think there's any. I mean, you used to get this sort of stuff from Damascus, and in fact, there was a political party called the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, which wanted the reunification of Greater Syria, and so forth. And the idea that this was all split up into little states was some sort of wickedness on the part of colonialism. But I don't think this has any real traction.
Now, I'd like to be on the very optimistic point, and that is, do you think that when Syria becomes independent again,
You mean when the fighting stops? I think.
Yeah, that's right. When once Syria becomes reformed, do you think that Syria will begin its peace process with Israel?
You see,
I mean, because
all Syria wants is I mean, you see, basically, the Syrian thing is quite simple. They just want the Golan Heights back.
really,
Yes, I mean,
why would they want the Golan
because
Heights back?
this was part of Syria until 1973. So I mean, the idea is that this was captured illegally in war, and so we have it returned. So this is any settlement would have to include that. Of course, the population would probably be most miserable to have to go back to Syria, but let's forget about that. But that is what they would want. So this is really not. I mean, there are various other little tiny boundary changes.
Regardless if they have a new Syrian government and
Well,
it's reformed,
well, it's. I mean,
and they want the Golan Heights back.
Basically, this was what was almost being negotiated. As far back as the early 1990s. I mean, the Syrians don't really have much more stake in it for Syria. Now, if you're saying that, are the Syrians going to, go forward with some sort of grand Palestinian project in mind, I very much doubt it. I don't think the Syrians give a damn about Palestinians anymore.
Speaking about the change, in the sentiments for Syria, we thank you for joining us here at National Business Choice, and thank you for giving us some insights on what's happening in Syria and Lebanon, Dr. Peter.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here at the National Business Choice with Dr. Peter Slotnick. And please do look out for our YouTube channel, the National Business Choice Show, and have a great week ahead. I'm Robin Steinberg. Thank you for joining me.